International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to our continuation of Series 19. This one looking at the players of the 2023 Asian Cup, due to be played in January 2024. This episode is looking at the players of Thailand. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin and this is Series 19 on the players of the 2023 Asian Cup played in 2024. This episode covers Thailand's players. We're doing this mediacast in two parts. Part one is a look at the candidates for the squad and their likelihood of making it. We think we went into too much detail in previous player media casts we've done, so we're aiming for a lighter, more listener-friendly version this time. Part two will come out when the squad lists are released and the final squad selected. We think that'll be in late December or early January, and at that time we'll go back over the list that we compiled today and see who made it and who didn't. We'll also cover a couple of other things that I'll talk more about at the end of the media cast here. And we have made a separate video on what we'll be covering over the next 9 months. YouTube watchers can see the link to that on the screen, and it can also be found in the show notes for both watchers and listeners. In short, we're focused on the Asian and African Cups, both of those taking place in early 2024. And we've also started coverage of World Cup 2026 qualifying. So this episode will have three sections. In section one, we give and discuss some general information on the team. Section two is the biggest part. We look at the main candidates in each position and their likelihood of making it. And in section three, we give any closing thoughts and preview part two in more detail. Let's begin then, and we will begin with some observations on the squad. So I just want to make a note about the AFF Cup, or the first A in AFF stands for ASEAN, which is the Association of Southeast Asian nations. And this tournament took place in December and January of 2022 and 23. And sorry, I just had to check on that. They didn't bring all of their best players to the tournament. There were some starters left off. That was actually a bit of a surprise because these local cups are taken quite seriously in Asia. And I've gathered that for this tournament, the team needs to be named in advance. So it's not like you can bring players in and out. If you're not named to the squad, then you miss all the games. And if you are named, you're kind of in for the whole tournament. And it is kind of a long tournament because the final stages from the quarterfinal onward are home and away playoffs. And also for Thailand, in the couple of games before the AFF Cup, they tended to use the players that would be in that cup. So any players missing the AFF Cup probably missed not only the 8 games of the actual cup, but probably the 2 before that, around 10 games. So some players may, we judge their likelihood based on their participation. And if they missed that, or if they weren't selected for that cup, then it looks like they missed a lot of games. But really, it's just one chunk of games. Another thing that creates a bit of confusion, my last point is going to be about the confusion. But this point is about the last 2 friendlies. In their last 2 friendlies in October of 2023, they played against Georgia and Estonia. That doesn't really matter who they played. But what's important is they left off regular players and kind of seemed to use these 2 games to try out new players, to bring back players who'd been off the squad for a while. And they kind of left off their regular starters from these 2 games. So it does make things a bit confusing because it's actually not as clear as I put it there. You know, a couple of players were used a couple of regular players were used there. So it actually just makes prediction a little bit difficult because we don't know exactly what the intent was behind that. Hopefully it was clear to the players, at least. Hopefully they didn't think they were being dumped from the squad by being not selected. But all the way through, we're going to talk about players either playing in or missing the last two games. But we're not going to actually take that seriously because we don't really know what they were doing. And that kind of brings us to the last point. Even beyond those last two friendlies, there's a lot of confusion, especially in certain positions. I'm thinking goalkeeper and right winger, particularly, where we have one player who may kind of stand out as the starter at the definite, but more at the likely level. And then a whole bunch of players at the possible level. These could be players who are regular starters who have been off the team for a while, maybe the last 6 games, or it could be players brought in the last 4 or the last 2 games. And we really don't know whether those consistent starters are being dumped right at the end here, whether the new ones are a serious consideration. When we look at it on a case-by-case basis, we do see some players who surely can't be left off the squad, and then some new ones who look like good candidates. But then we also see some brought in for the last few games that don't really look like good candidates at all. So it's confusing for us. And again, we wonder whether that confusion exists within the squad. It would certainly be kind of a rot within the squad if the players are as confused as I am when I was preparing this as to who the starters might be or who the candidates they're thinking of bringing to the cup might be. So again, we'll see that confusion as we go through the positions in section 2. Let's look at retirements, and at least this one is blessedly simple. Really, there are no retirements, no clear retirements since the 2019 Asian Cup. Generally for this, we look at players who are veterans, so who have over 60 caps or more, and who have played in the Asian Cup in 2019 but have retired since. We do have some players who seem to be off the squad. They maybe last appeared in 2022, so we might suspect they're retired, but we cover those in the section below. We'll mention them in the seems to be off the squad category. Let's take a look at the club affiliations for the Thai players, and we'll begin by saying that most of them play for domestic clubs. I would say that's about 85% or so playing for domestic clubs. And they have a pretty good league, actually. The big clubs, I usually try to reduce it to 3, but I think 5 was appropriate for Thailand. So Buriram United, these are the clubs contributing the most to the national team players. Muang Thong United, Port FC, Bangkok United, and BG Pathum United. And some people may be more familiar with that team as Bangkok Glass. That's what the BG stands for. It used to be called Bangkok Glass. We do have some players playing outside of the country, though. Firstly, those within the region. We have a couple of players in Japan and at least one player in Indonesia. The Japan league is probably a step up for the Thai players, where the Indonesia league is probably a sideways step, I would say. We also have some players playing worldwide in the league. And we have Belgium and Denmark teams represented. So we'll try to mention those as we go through the players. And finally, in terms of big club affiliations, I would say the biggest one is Urawa Red Diamonds in Japan. They're actually one of the top teams in Asia. They often win the, well, I shouldn't say often, but they are winners of the Asian Champions League, I think more than once. So a big team in Asia there, and the player is actually on loan to them. And I would say Odense in Denmark is probably the second biggest club there. Okay, let's take a look at their recent games. So these are the games we analyze to see a player's participation over the last 2 years. And I'll go through them quickly because the results are not that important to us. Rather, the lineups are actually of more interest. So we begin with the AFF Asian Cup. That was actually the previous one. That tournament usually goes over the new year. So the previous edition ended in January 2022. Just one game left for them to play there against Indonesia. And we had friendlies in March, 2 in March against Nepal and Suriname, and 2 in May 2022 against Turkmenistan and Bahrain. In June of 2023, they played Asian Cup 2023 qualifiers. So the final round that got them to this tournament here, and those 3 games were against Maldives, Sri Lanka, and Uzbekistan. So 3 games there. It was friendlies after that, but in September of 2022, Thailand organizes the Kirin Cup, kind of a little mini tournament within Thailand. And they played Malaysia and Trinidad and Tobago there. Unlike most teams that had friendlies in October and November, Thailand seemed to give their players time off during those international periods, so no games there. But 2 games in December of 2022 against Myanmar and Chinese Taipei, or Taiwan. And that ended out 2022. Well, no, it didn't actually, because the AFF ASEAN Cup began in December 2022. So 3 of the 4 group stage games were played in 2022. That was Brunei, Philippines, and Indonesia. And then in January was the 4th group stage game against Cambodia, and then the finals. So the quarterfinals, that was home and away games against Malaysia, and the semifinals, home and away games against Vietnam. So 5 games in all in January and 8 AFF Asian Cup games. And as I said, those 2 games in December against Myanmar and Chinese Taipei really acted like preparatory games for the squad for the AFF Cup. So it would be the same players, basically. After that, it's just friendlies. So March 2023, 2 friendlies against Syria and USA. What am I talking about? Syria and UAE. June 2023, 2 friendlies. Chinese Taipei again, and Hong Kong. In September 2023, 2 games. This is the yearly Kirin Cup again, and this time they played Lebanon and Iraq. And finally, those 2 odd games in October 2023, which they used kind of to build the team or whatever they were doing against Georgia and Estonia. Anyway, they tried out a lot of new players or brought back players for those. Okay, that is the period we'll be looking at then, 28 games in all. And as I said, we're more interested in the formations there. So most commonly it was a 4-2-3-1. And I think actually for Thailand, when we go through the players, you should keep this formation in mind. Because even when experimenting, which they did, they always seem to come back to this 4-3-2-1. So they did experiment with 5 at the back and 3 at the back. The 2 times each they used those defensive formations. And they also had variations on the 4-2-3-1. For example, a 4-1-3-2 or a 4-3-2-1. But these were just kind of one-off experiments, I think. And the 4-4-2 formation was used a few times, and that was usually against easy teams like in the first 3 games of the AFF Cup. So we don't expect that they're going to do that in the tournament here. And what we really expect is the 4-2-3-1 in the Asian Cup. Okay, the last section then is a look at their upcoming games. So for the Asian region, the World Cup 2026 qualifiers began in October. That began with the preliminary round. The bottom 20 teams in the region had a home and away knockout round. And we were happy to cover a podcast for each of those games, each of those sets, because it gave us a chance to look at some of the weaker teams in the region that often get overlooked. So we have done that, but here we're on to round 2. Thailand got a bye in that round, but you'll see they actually played one of the teams that that advanced from that round. So 2 games in November. It's the first week of November as we do this here. So this is about a week in the future. And on November 15th, they will be playing China at home. And then they will be playing Singapore away. Singapore is the team that advanced from the October round. They advanced ahead of Guam. There we go. So those 2 games on November 15th and 20th. And Thailand is one of the few teams that actually has organized a pre-tournament friendly. And that is against Japan. So they will be playing Japan away. And that is on December 31st. On December 31st. But again, we think most teams are going to arrange a few friendlies. We even expect probably more than one for Thailand. So certainly against China, we're looking forward to seeing that game, because we guess that they'll be using their best players and putting out their a squad that may be similar to the one that they'll bring to the Asian Cup. And given that they're playing away against Singapore, and Singapore is not a really weak team, we think they'll use their best players for that one too. Okay, let's move on to part 2, where we look at the candidates, but actually we're going to start with the managerial situation there. And we'll go back to the 2019 Asian Cup to begin. And the manager taking them into that was Milovan Rajevac. He's a Serbian manager. However, they got off to an awful start there. Their 4-1 loss to India caused him to be fired, and he was replaced by interim manager. Well, the assistant manager going into the tournament basically became the caretaker manager, and that was Sirisak Yodyarthai. So he managed them through the last 2 games there and continued as interim manager until July 2019. Then they found their next manager. That was Akira Nishino. Akira Nishino had been manager of Japan during the 2018 World Cup, and now is the manager of Thailand. He lasted until 2021, July 2021, but he then was fired because of what they considered a poor performance in 2022 World Cup qualifying. So in September of 2022, the manager that we have now, Alexander Polkin, was hired, and he will be leading them through this cup. Alexander Polkin, this, as you see, if you're watching the YouTube video, his name is in gray, and that means that he hasn't been through a major tournament. So manager of the Thailand national team since 2021. He also managed a few teams in Southeast Asia, Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, Bangkok United in Thailand, and a few other teams in Thailand since around 2013. He's been in Southeast Asia. So Alexander Polkin leading them through this 2023 Asian Cup, or I'm going to put him as a likely, because they do kind of have a tendency to fire managers. there. Okay, let's move on to goalkeepers, and you'll see a bit of a messy situation here, but we'll begin by naming the candidates. So we begin with the likely candidate, Campo Patho Makakul. And then we have a whole bunch of possible candidates. So the first one is Chache Budprom. And next is Patiwat Kamame. The next is Chirawat Wangthapan. Next, Sumithi Kokfo. Kittipong Futhchueak. And that's it for the possible candidates. And we have one who is off the squad, but we'll put him on the list, or seems to be off the squad, because he last played in June 2022. And it was actually the backup keeper for the 2019 Asian Cup who became the starting keeper after that 4-1 loss to India. And that is Sarawak Tetsung Noen. And he features in the narrative. So that's why we're putting him here, but he hasn't played since 2022, so not a candidate really for this cup. Okay, and let's just go over the bios actually quite quickly here. So Campo Patho Makakul first appeared for the national team on the bench way back in 2013. But recently has started 9 of their 28 games over the past 2 years, and he was also on the bench for 9, not selected for 10. But he does seem the most likely candidate among the ones we have here. We put him at the likely level. Tachai Budprom is the first of our possible candidates, and he's been with the team since 2012 and has 17 caps. And he was the starter in the 2019 Asian Cup, but as we just saw, he lost his starting position after that embarrassing loss to India. So he returned after a 19-month absence, and in June of 2023, and started 3 of the remaining 6 games, and was on the bench for 1 and not selected for the last 2 matches. So again, we're not taking those last 2 matches very seriously. So I'm almost tempted to move him up to likely here, but we'll leave him at the top of the possible list. That is Chache Budprom. Next, we have Patiwat Kamei, and he returned himself after a 12-month absence in March of 2023, and he started 2 of their remaining 8 games and was on the bench for 4 and not selected for the last 2 matches. So personally, I think those 2 actually will be the backup keepers, but we'll look at the other candidates as well. We have Chirawat Wangthafan, and he got his first appearance in September of 2023, so not that long ago. He didn't start any of the 4 remaining games since then, but he was on the bench for all 4 matches, so has a bit of a possibility there. Next is Sumithi Kokfo, and he got his first appearance even later in October of 2023, and didn't start either of the remaining 2 games, but he was on the bench for both of those. Next is Tharanon Anuin, and he returned after a 9-month absence in December of 2022 and didn't start any of their remaining 18 games there, but he was on the bench for 12 of them. And only 6 matches that he wasn't selected for, but that includes the last 4 matches. So again, yeah, very difficult to determine here. And actually, Anuin was the backup keeper, the 3rd string keeper in the 2019 Asian Cup. So that maybe gets him a little more of a chance too. Our final possible candidate, Kittipong Futhchueak, is first appeared on the bench in May of 2022 and actually started 8 of their remaining 25 games and was on the bench for 9 of them, but he was not selected for the last 8 matches. So we have a lot of players with a decent shout at the position. So let's summarize the position with a bit of a narrative. This position of goalkeeper has never really been settled. The one who seems to be off the squad, Ted Sung Noen, roughly held it at the beginning of 2022 and was replaced in 3 of the 8 games, the first 8 games, by 3 different keepers. Ted Sung Noen was off the team, as we saw, in June of 2022. And then the position seemed shared by, or you could view it as a battle between, Futh Chuayak and Patho Makakul. Futh Chuayak seemed to be winning that battle by starting 5 games of the AFF Cup, the ASEAN Cup there. But Path Makakul played the last 3 of the AFF Cup games. He then faced competition from Kamai, who played 2 of the last 8 games, but then Budprom, who played 3, while Patho Makakul played 1, and then he played the last 2. So because the last 2 were kind of B-team games, we can't be sure that Patho Makakul is the first choice. But he does seem the most likely with Budprom, Futha Chuayak, and Kamai, all with decent claims. But I got to say, you could put an argument for forward for all possible candidates. So sorry that was so complex, but it really is kind of showing that things are really up in the air for Thailand, and the manager certainly has some decisions to make. I wonder if it's kind of frustrating too for the players who must be wondering, each of them wondering what their status is with the squad. However, I think goalkeepers will prove the most confusing because it's a little bit better as we go forward. So let's move on to central defenders, and we have a definite candidate in Kritsada Kaman, and a likely candidate in Panza Hemvibun, and actually 2 more likely candidates, Elias Dola and Jakafan Prezuan. And then a couple of possible candidates in Chalurmsak Oki and Adisorn Promrak. Okay, and that is all the candidates we have. So let's go back and look at a little bio of these players. So our definite candidate, Kritsada Kaman. Kaman has been with the team since 2021, but has amassed 28 caps already. He started 20 of their 28 games over the past 2 years, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 1, and not selected. Long story short, there were 5 absences. He was with the under-23 team for 3 of them, but all of them were near the beginning of the 2-year period we're looking at. So Kritsada Kaman, a definite candidate for the squad. He is listed, by the way, as a defensive midfielder, but he has played as a central defender in all but 1 of those 20 games, 20 starts. Next, we have Panza Hemvibun at the likely level, and he's been with the team since 2017 with 40 caps and 6 goals. He was a starter in the Asian Cup in 2019, and he started 16 of their 28 games over the past 2 years, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 2, and not selected for 9 matches. So Panza Hemvibun, a regular starter, but not selected for 6 of the last 8 matches, actually. So that put a bit of a question mark above him. Elias Dola is a Swedish-born player. He's been with Thailand since 2019 with 11 caps and 1 goal. He does play in Southeast Asia, actually for Bali United in Indonesia, but he was with Port FC in Thailand, probably the biggest club there. But in 2014, he was with Rosengard in Sweden. To the national team, he returned after a 15-month absence. to start 4 of their remaining 8 games. So he came back in March of 2023, and he was started 4, subbed in for 1, and on the bench for 3 matches. So he seems to be starting more and more, and he's regularly called up recently. Okay, next we have Jakafan Presuwan, and he has been with the team since 2022 with 11 caps and 1 goal. He got his first cap in May of 2022 and started 6 of their remaining 25 games. He was subbed in for 5 and on the bench for 10. So there were only 4 matches that he wasn't selected for. So Presuwan, a likely candidate also. Now our 2 possible candidates, Chalumsak Oke, got his first cap in March 2022 and started 4, subbed in for 5 and on the bench for 11. So just 7 matches that he wasn't called up for. So Oke is a possible candidate. And our other possible is Manuel Burr. And he has been with the team since 2017 with 20 caps. And he's German-born, and he did play for teams in Germany until 2016 when he came to Thailand, and has been with Bangkok United since that time. Over the past 2 years, he started 3 of their 28 games, subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 1 and injured for 5. So not selected for 19 matches, including the last 6 matches. But he did get 2 starts in March of 2023. I almost think we should put him down to possible, but unlikely there. Okay, and I realize actually in the graphics I put the wrong name. So it's Manuel Burr. Adesoran Promrak is actually in the possible but unlikely category. And it's a bit of an interesting story. He's a bit of a veteran with the team. Since 2014 with 32 caps, and he returned after an almost 4-year absence just for the last 2 games here, where he appeared twice on the bench. So I don't know if this constitutes a comeback, but kind of interesting, kind of brought in at the last moment and creating a bit of confusion for us there. So let's go back and look at the position of central defenders to see what the story is. So really we have a mix of about 5 rotating players with defensive midfielders thrown into that mix. In fact, the most predominant starter, as we saw, is defensive midfielder Kaman. The most common partnership is with Hemviboon, so Kaman and Hemviboon, and that was especially prominent in the AFF Cup. But there has been a lot of rotation with Dola, Presuwan, and defensive midfielder Pomfan, who we'll meet soon, each of them getting about 5 starts in the position over the 25 games. We saw that Beer, possible candidate Beer, started 2 in March and Oki started 2 in June, but then it went back to the main 5 in the fall. So I'll just repeat those names: Kaman, Hemviboon, Dola, Presuwan, and Pomfan. Okay, so yes, a bit unsure. Again, we'll see who they come out with in the November games, because that may shed some light. And let's move on to left backs here. We have a definite candidate in Theraton Bummaton, and likely candidates, possible candidates in Pirapat Nochaya and Chatmonkol Ruan Thangarot. A possible candidate, and we're going to post the name of the possible but unlikely candidate, and that is Sasalak Hapricon. Hapricon. So he got an injury in March of 2023 and has not played for the last 6 games. But we think it's possible that he may come back. He was on the squad for the 2019 Asian Cup, even though he saw no action, and did play before that injury. In fact, even though he's coded as a left back, he interestingly played as a right winger, and I think that was in more than one match, but in at least one match. So Sasalak Hapricon with an outside chance. I'm also going to tell the story of a player who seems to be off the squad, Kevin Deerom Ram. So a bit of a sad story. He returned after a more than 3-year absence to play 2 games, and then he got injured. So that was sad. Just made the team and then got injured immediately. And even after recovering, he never made it back to the team. So he's a Swedish-born player. I think there's an outside chance of him coming back, but it's a bit of a sad story that he had an opportunity and it seemed to be kind of swiped away from him. Anyway, we'll focus on our three more likely candidates, the 1 definite and 2 possible. So let's begin with the definite, Thiratorn Bunmatten. So he is a veteran with the team since 2010 and has 89 caps and 8 goals. And he has actually played for Yokohama F. Marinos in Japan. So one of the more successful Thai players is Bunmatten, and he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup, and over the past 2 years has started in 20 of their 28 games, and not selected for 6 matches, including the last 2. So we think Bunmatten is a definite candidate. Next, we have possible candidate Pirapat Nochaya, and he's been with the team since 2013 with 36 caps, so he's a pretty experienced player too. Over the past 2 years, though, he's only started 4 of their 28 games, and he was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 4, and not selected for 17 games. That included a stretch of 12 games in the middle of that period. So Nochaya, a possible candidate. And finally, we have Chatmongkol Ruantharot, and he got his first appearance actually back in May of 2021, but then was off the team for 16 months until he returned in September 2022 to start 2 of their remaining 20 games. He was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 10. So just 6 matches he wasn't selected for, and 4 of those he was with the under-23 team. So he's almost always called up, but very rarely fielded. Think of Ruanthanarot as a substitute, but a pretty reliably called up one. Okay, let's go back to the position of left back then with a narrative. And we see that basically Bunmatten and Nochaya shared the position in the early period. Hapricon increasingly took over in the lead up to the AFF Cup, and Ruanthanarot got his only 2 starts during that period. And Hapricon started all of the AFF Cup games there. So whether he was intended to be just limited to the AFF Cup, as some players were, his injury immediately after lost him the spot, and even call-ups after he recovered. So it is Bunmatten and Nochaya who resumed their rotation of the position. And when it's a 3-man backline, it's actually not these 2 players who push up to become midfielders, but rather a separate player, a left midfielder or left winger, is used in that situation. So basically, Bunmatten and Nochaya sharing the position. Bunmatten probably the more likely starter. Okay, on to right backs. And here we only have possible candidates, but we have several of them. So we begin with Tristan Doe, and then Nicholas Mikkelsen, and Sufanan Burirat, Nitipong Selenon, and James Beresford. 5 possible candidates there. And yes, that's all we have. We do, for most of these positions, we do have a few players at the possible but unlikely or seem to be off the squad, but we don't introduce all of them, only if we have a reason to, and we'll bring them back if they appear on the final roster there. Okay, let's go back to the beginning then with Tristan Doe, and he has been with the team since 2015 with 50 goals, and he was with the Strasbourg Youth Club in France and played for a few teams in France before coming back to before coming to Thailand. He was actually born in France, and he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup, Tristan Doe, and started 7 of their 28 games over the past 2 years, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 2, and not selected for a string of 18 matches in the middle. So we can only consider him a possible candidate here. So he was a regular, off the team for 18 games in a row, and then returned for the last 2 matches, which doesn't necessarily mean much. Next, we have Nicholas Mikkelsen, and he has been with the team since his first cap in March 2023, and then started 6 of their remaining 8 games, and subbed in. No, just started 6 and then was not selected for the next 2 matches. So I'm actually going to move him above Tristan Doe because I don't take those last 2 matches very seriously, and I don't think missing them really means that you're off the team. Okay, next we have Sufanan Burirat, and he got his first cap in March of 2022, started 11 of their remaining 27 games, subbed in for 4 and was on the bench for 5. However, he was not selected for the last 6 matches, so he was quickly entrenched into the team since his start, regularly selected, and then dumped for the last 6. So really have no idea what's going on with him. We'll have to see if he comes back in November or into the Asian Cup. Our next possible candidate, Nitipong Selenon, got his or has been with the team since 2019, but only 4 caps in that time. He actually returned after a more than 2-year absence just recently here in December or in September of 2023, and didn't start any of the games, but was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1, and then not selected for those last 2 matches. So recalled in September of 2023, and again we have to put him at the possible level. And finally, James Beresford, he first appeared just recently in October of 2023. He didn't start either of those games, but was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for the for the other. So we wouldn't be surprised if a couple of players tried out in these October games do come into the team, but we really don't know. So we put James Beresford at the possible level, leaving us with 5 possible candidates here. And I should have actually put a player on the list, even though he seems to be off the squad, and that's Narubodin Wirawatnodom. Last appeared for the team in September of 2022, but he does feature in the narrative here. So he, Wirawatnodom, and Tristan Doe were the predominant right backs in the early period. But by degrees, Burirat took over and actually played all the games in the AFF Cup. Mikkelsen then had a spell of 6 games until they returned to Tristan Doe in the last 2 games. Yes, and unlike the left side, when it's a 3-man defense and this position moves up to become a right winger, it actually is the right back who pushes up into the right wing position. Okay, so a little unclear. My guess here would be Mikkelsen, but I wouldn't be surprised if they brought Tristan back into the fold here. But it's very hard to tell with the changes in the last two games there. Okay, let us move on to midfielders. And we begin with defensive midfielders. So let's look at the candidates there. And we begin with Weerathep Pomvan. But we've seen his name before as a central defender. About half of his starts, he plays as a central defender, and about half as a defensive midfielder. And he is a definite candidate. We have a likely candidate in Thitipan Poingchan, and then we have one possible candidate in Fitiwat Sukjit Hamakul, or likely candidate. I'll just mention one player who's on the possible but unlikely, and that is Sanrawat Dechmeter. And he was a starter actually in the Asian Cup in 2019, but lost his position after that loss to India. And he has not been selected for the last 8 matches. He actually was off the team for a while, came back for a bit, and then was off the team again. So we don't really expect to see Dechmeter, but I thought it was possible enough that it is worth mentioning his name and putting him on the list. Okay, let's go back to the definite candidate. And Weerathep Pomvan is quite new to the team, actually, since 2021. And over the past 2 years, he started 14 of their 28 games. He subbed in for 6 and was on the bench for 8 others. So he has always been called up. And as I said, kind of used both as a central defender and a defensive midfielder, Weerathep Pomvan. Next, we have Thitipan Poingchan, bit of a veteran with the team since 2013, with 58 caps and 7 goals. And he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup. And over the past 2 years, he started 10 of their 28 games, subbed in for 3 and was on the bench for 3, and was not selected for 12 others. But that does include the 8 AFF Cup games and also the last 2 matches. So perhaps I'm being a bit generous in considering him a likely candidate, but I do think he's an important player for the team, Poingchan. So we'll leave him at the likely level, even though the number of or his participation suggests more the possible level. Anyway, let's move on to our possible candidate. That's Fitiwat Sukjit Hamakul. And he started 8 of their 28 games over the past 2 years. He was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 1, and not selected for 17 others. So also the AFF Cup for him. And in fact, a stretch of 12 games in a row in the middle of the period there. Otherwise, apart from that period, he's been fairly regular. So we do keep or have Sukjit Hamakul as a possible candidate. Okay, let us go back, and we will do a summary for this position and a separate summary for central midfielders. It's usually a 2-man midfield in the 4-2-3-1 formation that they favor. However, there's not really a division between defensive midfield and central midfield. The 3 games where they had a single defensive midfielder, it was Pomvan, who we see here, or else right back Bunmatten, who, as we'll see, plays central midfielder quite a bit. Okay, and let's look at the players coded as central midfielders. And we only actually have possible candidates here. We start at the possible level with Picha Otra and also Poklo Anand. And that's it, just those 2 candidates. So no surprise they need to bring in Bunmatten, because that's not a lot of central midfielders. I will put or make mention of Tanabun Kesarat, who seems to be off the squad. He was on the Asian Cup squad, on the bench for the first game in 2019, but then gained a starting position after their terrible opening, but actually hasn't played for the team since June 2022. But Kesarat does feature in the narrative, which we'll do a bit later. First, let's take a look at the candidates we have here. So Picha Otra started only one of their 28 games over the past 2 years, but was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 5, not selected for the 18 matches there. So he's only been used smatteringly, and was called up, though, for those last 2 games in October, the B team matches, I call them. Next, we have Poklo Anand, and he returned after a long absence, a 20-month absence, in September of 2023, so just recently, and didn't start any of their remaining 4 games, but was subbed in for 2, the 2 September games, but then not selected for the October ones. So again, a little hard to tell what his status would be with the club. But I should have mentioned that he is almost a veteran with the team since 2011, with 48 caps and 6 goals. So with his experience, probably increasing his chances a little bit. We have him at the possible level here. Poklo Anand. Okay, let's go back and summarize this position then. So we saw the defensive midfielders, the likely candidate Thitipan Pungchan, and the definite candidate Wirathap Pomfan. And those 2 are actually the main players, sometimes as a pair, and they in the 4-2-1-3 are usually the pairing. But equally as much out of position players are used. So we do have the right back Bunmathan, and attacking midfielder Yuyan is actually used as well. And those 2, Bunmathan and Yuyan, paired in especially the AFF Cup. And that was usually as a central midfield pairing, but sometimes it was rather like a 4-1-1 situation with Bunmathan at the back and Yuyan in front. And even those 2 were paired in a 4-3-3 formation, Bunmathan, Yuyan on the left, and someone else. So the player Sukhjit Hammakul pops up throughout, but was really not part of the AFF Cup and in the few games prior to that. But since then, it has been a mix of all of these players, Pomfan, Pangchan, Yuyan, Sukhjit Hammakul, and Bunmathan. And then actually Kaman, the player we met as a defensive midfielder, assuming his natural position of defensive midfielder in one of the games. So once again, we have pretty much a big mess of players here, and very hard to predict starters among them. And it may well be that they continue to rotate in the cup, but we can't really see a clear pattern, I must say, for central midfielders. Okay, let's move on to left midfielders. And we just have one candidate here, but he is a definite candidate, and it is Bordin Fala. And Fala has been with the team since 2017. He has 36 caps and 6 goals, and started 9 of their 28 games over the past 2 years. He subbed in for 3 and was on the bench for 2. So just 4 matches that he wasn't selected for. And even though he's coded as a left midfielder, he more covers the upper left quadrant of the field. So anything from left back to left winger to left attacking midfielder, even as a left forward, I think. Okay, and a few times, yes, they have used a formation of 4-3-3 that does require a left midfielder and a right midfielder. And speaking of right midfield, we'll move on to that position. But here we just have one possible but unlikely candidate. But we will introduce him because he plays a role in the narrative here. Chamrat Sami has been on the team since 2017 with 17 caps and 2 goals. And he returned after an 18-month absence in December of 2022 and started 6 of their remaining 18 games and was subbed in for 5 and on the bench for 1, but then not selected for the last 6 matches. So there's still a chance of him coming back in. Basically, he was off the team. He came back to play in the AFF Cup and the surrounding few matches, and then he was off the team again. He's actually coded as a central midfielder, but played actually as a right midfielder and a right winger, and oddly once as a left forward as well. But generally, when the 4-3-3 was used, it was him when he was there, or else it would have been played by one of the central midfielders. So yes, the position of left and right midfielders are not used a lot, and really it's like most teams, more a matter of the left wingers and attacking midfielders. So when we say left winger, we basically also mean left attacking midfielders, depending on what the formation is. And for left wingers, we have one candidate at the possible level. That is Chaki Laptrakul. And that's all we have over there. We have one other candidate who we won't mention unless he kind of comes back into the picture. So the reason I guess we don't have many candidates over here is because everything on the left, left wing, left attacking midfielder, but actually I made a mistake before, not left forward, but left midfield, left winger, left attacking midfielder is played by Borden Fala, who we just met as a left midfielder. And when he is missing, attacking midfielder Sarachat, who we'll meet shortly, fills in. And otherwise, 2 players filled in for the position one time each there. But almost always it's Fala over on the left. Right wingers, though, we do have more candidates here, and we have a possible candidate who we just mentioned, Superchok Sarachat. And I did say he was an attacking midfielder, but we've moved him to right winger here because that's the position he's played mostly over the period that we're talking about. Also, a likely candidate is Chanarong Promsikayu there. And we also have 3 possible candidates, so a lot more than on the left. Oops, I put those players in the wrong place on the graphics. Here we go. So our first possible candidate is Ekani Panya, and then Stufanat Muanta, and finally Pathompom Charo and Ratinapirom. So I think announcers will be hoping that he's not selected because it's such a long name. I'll say it again. Pathompom Charo and Ratanapiram. And one player at the possible but unlikely candidate, will just mention his name, Jarowinsak Wongorn. Jarowinsak Wongorn, but he hasn't appeared for the last 8 matches, basically just brought in for the AFF Cup there. And again, we'll bring him back if he does come back into the picture. But let's look at these candidates, beginning with Superchok Sarachat. So he's been with the team since 2017 with 26 caps and 6 goals. And he is also playing in Japan with Consadole Sapporo since 2023. He was actually on loan to them since 2022. And he was not selected for the Asian Cup in 2019, named to the preliminary squad, but surprisingly not selected because we thought he would be. Sarachat started 10 of their 28 games over the past 2 years, and he's been on the bench for one and not selected for 17 others. Those include the AFF Cup and a few games surrounding them and the last two matches. But we do consider him likely because he started 6 of the last 8 games, and we don't consider the last 2 matches strong evidence for or against their likelihood. The other likely candidate is Chanarong Promsrikayu, and he got his first appearance on the bench in September 2022 and started 5 of their remaining 20 games, subbed in for 7 and on the bench for 4. And the 4 matches that he wasn't selected for, he was with the under-23 team. So he's 22 years old. And he's back in Thailand now, but in 2021 and 22 was loaned to a Spanish team called Adarve. I'm not actually familiar with that team. But anyway, called up quite consistently, and Promsikayu a likely candidate. Then the first of our 3 possible candidates, Ekanat Panya, has been with the team since 2019 with 18 caps and 1 goal, and probably is the player with the biggest club affiliation right now. He's actually with Muang Thong United in Thailand, but he since 2023 has been loaned to Owara Red Diamonds in Japan, one of the biggest clubs in Asia. So that is a good club affiliation. In terms of the last 2 years with Thailand, he's only started 8 of their last 28 games, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2, and not selected for the last 6 matches. So we think his club affiliation is a mark in his favor, but not selected for the last 6 matches is a bit baffling, frankly. That is Ekanat Panya. Next, we have Sufanat Muanta. He has been with the team since 2019 with 12 caps and an impressive 6 goals for the 21-year-old. And he is also on loan to Leuven in Belgium. That's not a huge European team, but it is a European team that actually a lot of foreign players go through. So it's a fairly good club affiliation. Over the last 2 years, Muanta has started 4 of their 28 games, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1. He was on special leave for 9 matches, which I'm not sure what that means actually. And he was out with a hamstring injury for the last 2 matches and not selected for 9 others. So kind of up in the air. Muanta, but an exciting young player, and we'll have to update that hamstring injury in part 2 of the mediacast here. Next we have Pathompom Charo and Ratan Apirapom. Sorry, I said that wrong, but I'll come back to it. Anyway, he started 5 of their 28 games over the past 2 years. He was subbed in for 7 and on the bench for 2, and not selected for 14 matches. Those also are the AFF Cup and surrounding matches, as well as the last 2 matches. So 22 years old, but with 20 caps already since 2021. That's Charo and Ratan Apirom. I think I did a bit better that time. Okay, so let's look at the position of right winger over here. So if Thala is a staple on the left, the right side is really a mishmash of names, and many of them attacking midfielders. Just like the, yes, I should have actually said not only Sarachat, but Panya are both coded as attacking midfielders, but we move them over here because they play as right wingers or right attacking midfielders more. So attacking midfielder Sarachat, who we did see covering Fala on the left side sometimes, also appears here. And he and attacking midfielder Panya both pop up throughout the whole 2-year period. Charo and Ratan Apirom was common in the first half of 2022, and the position was very unsettled until the AFF Cup, with several players coming in, including left-back Haprekon playing there once. But overall, in the AFF Cup, Pena occupied it regularly, and central midfielder Chamrat Sami appeared there towards the end. Recently, Pena has not appeared, and Sarachat has been there the most, but Promsi Kayu and a few single appearances by various players, including Muanta, have appeared in this position. So if that sounds confusing, well, frankly, it is, and is one of several positions on the squad which are really unclear as to who is in them. Not only players coded in that position playing them, but players out of position. So we really can't make a prediction for who looks like the starting right winger. A bit ironic given that it's so stable on the left. Anyway, we move on to the forward line, and we begin with attacking midfielders as far as that goes. And we begin with a name we have seen pop up in the central midfield, and that is definite candidate Sarich Yuyen. And we have a likely candidate also in Chanathip Songkrasin. We also have several possible candidates here, so we will just name them. Warachit Kanitsrai Bampem is the first. Next, we have Chanukan Karin. And then Ben Davis. So I'm having a bit of trouble with my graphics here. Ben Davis. Next, we have Purachet Thodsanit. And finally, Athit Berg. And we do have one player who seems to be off the squad, but I'll mention him because he features in the narrative. That is Sumanya Purasai. He was part of the Asian Cup 2019 squad, but last appeared well, anyway, he has not been selected for the last 8 matches. So he was brought in for games surrounding the AFF Cup, but hadn't been selected both before and after that. The other thing is that Purasai is 37 years old, so seems to be off the squad, we think. Let's go back to those candidates who have a stronger likelihood, though, and beginning with definite candidate Sarach Yuyan. So he's a veteran with the team with 73 caps and 6 goals since 2013. However, he was not part of the 2019 Asian Cup squad, not even named to the preliminary squad there. However, he came back into the team after that and started 19 of their 28 games over the past 2 years, on the bench for 1 and not selected for 8. But he did miss the last 2 games, which we don't consider that important. The likely candidate is Chanathip Songkrasin, and he is also a veteran with 66 caps and 12 goals since 2012, and another player who's played outside of Thailand with Kawasaki Frontal and Consadole Sapporo from 2018 to 23, but he's recently returned to Thailand here. And he was a starter in the 2019 Asian Cup. Songkrasin, a fairly big name on the squad, actually. But over the past 2 years, he's only started 6 of their 28 games. But that was largely because he was out for 3 separate injuries during this period. But he wasn't selected for 15 games. So really, that's more like a possible candidate. But he is a big name. So we keep him as a likely candidate. That is Chanathip Songkrasin. Now we launch into our possible candidates, beginning with Warachat Kanitsrai Bampen. And he started 1 of their 28 games, and he was on the bench for 6 and not selected for 12. Yeah, so basically missed all of the AFF Cup games, so we consider him possible. Next, we have Chanukan Karin, who got his first cap in March of 2023 and didn't start any games, but he was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 1. And those subbings included the last 2 matches. Next, Ben Davis, also new to the team in September 2023, didn't start any, but was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 2. Purachat Thodsanit even later joined the team, his first cap in in October 2023, and started one of their remaining 2 games and was on the bench for the other. And finally, Athith Berg, he was born in Norway and got his first cap also in October 2023 and started neither of those October games, but was subbed in for both. So several of those candidates brand new to the squad, and we find it a bit hard to take those October games seriously because so many new players were tried out. So I'm favoring the veterans here, Yuyen and Songkrasin, with those possible candidates, really just an outside chance of making it in. But who knows? Let's summarize the position. So this position of central attacking midfielder is fairly often used in the 4-2-3-1 formation, but in some formations it's not used, especially those in the AFF Cup formations. And we have seen some of these players coded as attacking midfielders play in various positions. In fact, we've moved a couple of them out, especially to the right wing. Anyway, despite playing central midfielder a lot, we left Yuyen here because he does play as a central attacking midfielder quite a bit when the position exists. And we might have done the same actually for the player coded as a defensive midfielder, Phuang Chan, who plays central attacking midfielder quite often, or did so in the early part of 2022, alongside several players who appeared there just once, most of whom are off the team right now. So Yuyen can be seen as taking over the position from Phuang Chan, if we want to simplify it. But throughout, Songkrasin has popped up, especially in the March and June 2023 friendlies. And very recently, as we saw, all sorts of new players have come and gone, or have come in for one match, or we'll have to see if any of those remain in the November games. So again, a lot of confusion here in the attacking midfielder, but we do favor Yuyen here with Songkrasin as the backup. Okay, and finally we move on to the forward line, and we'll introduce the candidates. A definite candidate in Tirasil Dangda, and we move down to the just possible level with Adisak Kraysorn, Supatai Chaded, Poramat Orjvirai, Tirasak Poifimai, and finally Yotsakorn Burafa. So 5 possible candidates here as well. So we can expect a bit more confusion here. So beginning with Tirasil Dangda, probably Thailand's most famous player, I would say. He's been with the team since 2007 with 126 caps and an impressive 64 goals. Amazing, really. That's a goal every second game, or a 50% scoring rate, which is incredible. He is 36 years old, though, and he played with Almira in Spain. That was on loan. And he was also with Manchester City in England in 2007 and 2008. He didn't play any games for Manchester City, but was on the roster for them. So as far back as the Asian Cup in 2007, he was on the squad. He actually appeared only briefly in game one in that tournament. That would have been right at the beginning of his career. For the 2019 Asian Cup, he was a starter, started and finished all 4 games there. Over the past 2 years, he started 16 of their 28 games. And he was on the bench for 4 and not selected for 8 matches, including the last 2. Nevertheless, Tirasal Dangda, it would be really shocking, even at his age, if they didn't bring him to the Cup. So a bit of a superstar for Thailand there. But now it gets confusing with 5 possible candidates. So we'll begin with Adisak Krasorn. He's a bit of a veteran with 56 caps and an impressive 21 goals since 2013. And he was a starter also in the 2019 Asian Cup. But over the past 2 years has started only 7 of their 28 games. He was subbed in for 7 and on the bench for 4 and not selected for 10 others, including the last 8 matches. So honestly, that would make us put him as possible, but unlikely. But he actually is a fairly big name for Thailand. So we put Adisak Krasorn as a possible candidate here. And if you're looking at the graphic, you'll see that he's coded as a right midfielder and attacking midfielder. But we're probably going to change that to forward because that's where he's been playing recently anyway. Okay, so next we have Supachai Chadid. And he's been with the team since 2018 with 30 caps and 5 goals. And he was also a starter in 2 of the games for the 2019 Asian Cup. But over the past 2 years has started only 3 games, and he was on the bench for 2 and not selected for 13. He had a couple of injuries during that time too. So he looked as an exciting prospect in 2019. He was kind of touted before the 2018 or 19 Asian Cup, but that didn't really come to fruition. But Supachai Chadid is still around, so we'll have to see how he does in this cup. Only a possible candidate to make the team at this point. Next, we have Pomerat Arsvire, and he got his first cap in December 2022. He started 2 games, subbed in for 8 and on the bench for 4. So just 4 matches that he wasn't selected for. And probably actually seems the most likely of the possible candidates so far. But it's just that Krasorn and Chadid are kind of bigger names than him. So Arsvire is regularly used mostly as a sub. But then he was not selected for 4 of the last 6 games. So creating a bit of confusion there. Next, Tirasak Poifimai has been with the team since September 2022 when he got his first appearance on the bench. He started 2 of their remaining 20 games, was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 1. And he was not selected for 8 matches, but all of those were AFF Cup matches. So a decent a chance of making the squad here. He's just 21 years old there with 6 caps, Poifimai, and a possible candidate. Finally, we have the brand new Yotsakorn Burafa, and he is just 18 years old. And came to the team in October 2023, so those last 2 kind of B team games. He started one of them and subbed in for the other, but again, we're really not sure what those last 2 games mean and whether they'll actually draw any players from them. Okay, let's finish with a summary of the forward position. Usually it's just 1 forward, but sometimes it's 2. Dangda is the most common name, but he actually only started a little more than half of the games. Krasorn, Chadid, and Muenta, the right winger Muenta, are the next most common in that order. Muenta starting twice So Crayson and Che did a little more than that. Otherwise, it's a bewildering array of players who have started there, and we're really not sure what the situation looks like. Again, Dangda starting slightly more than half. It's hard to believe that Crayson would really be off the team, and then these new players coming in at the end. We don't know what the status really will be. So that actually brings us to the end, and let's finish with closing thoughts. Well, I gotta say, among all the Asian teams, and there were some tough ones, but I gotta say this was the most difficult one to do, with players coming in and out, and so many positions really up in the air. We had about 3 or 4 positions where there was maybe one likely candidate, and then 6 or 7 possible candidates, all with a fairly even claim to the position, or at least to making it to the final squad. So it was really kind of tough to work through all of those candidates. Perhaps the November games will help to clarify things a lot, but I think the manager has an awful lot of work to do. If it's as confusing to the players as it is to the, as to me doing this podcast here, and what I mean by that is if the players are up in the air, having no idea where they stand with the team, then I think it's not a good situation for Thailand. From this point, it doesn't look good for Thailand going in to the tournament. Even some of the veterans being left off the team for the last 6 games or so, and unsure of whether they're on the team or not. So I'm kind of predicting a bit of chaos for Thailand, I must say, but we'll see if things look any different in the update podcast, especially whether some of those new players brought in actually are selected for the squad, or whether some of those veterans come back. Anyway, we will look to that in part 2, and we'll pay attention to any notable non-selections, so any likely or definite candidates here who are not selected for the final squad, and then any surprise inclusions that would be players we have as possibly off the squad, or possible but unlikely or seemingly off the squad who are actually brought back in, and finally any new players that we didn't mention on this list but are brought in at the very end. And I gotta say that I'm expecting more of those kind of surprises for Thailand than I would be for most teams. In part 2, then, we'll also do an update on injuries. We don't have any outstanding injury. I think there was one player with a hamstring injury there. That tends to be a longer term injury, so that may affect his participation in the Asian Cup. But we'll have to see when we get closer to the tournament. So we will update you on him and also any new injuries that arrive closer to the tournament. All right, that brings us to the end, and actually to the end of the series, or part 1 of the series on the Asian Cup players. So we will be back in probably early January to add part 2 to this. I hope to see you then. We originally planned to tag on our past, present, and future plans for the mediacast, but we have instead decided to put a link to that 10-minute video in the show notes. It covers what we're working on and what we plan to do over the next 9 months. We'd like to thank Naver Abachan and Pixabay for the wonderful music you hear in this mediacast. The title is called Arabic Trap.